When you look at the 20 biggest stadiums in the world, and let's think of like Allianz Arena or River Plate Stadium in Buenos Aires, Argentina, or some of your biggest even cricket pitches in the world, 10 of those stadiums are American college football stadiums. There's not a single NFL stadium on that top 20 list. You're looking at like Denver Broncos, New York Giants playing in much smaller stadiums. Ohio State University, which is university near where I work in Ohio, their stadium seats 110,000 people. The cultural significance and the breadth and depth of the love of college sports in America is really unmatched by any other sport, including the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball.
And listening to your presentation, you stressed how that the NCAA is broken and that it's corrupt. Just put into words, how corrupt and broken is that system?
Well, for a European audience, I think we can compare it directly to FIFA. Once money gets involved, and you're talking about very few people control billions of dollars of revenue, and those very few people want to keep their hands on that revenue, and that's the coaches who are making millions of dollars a year, the athletic directors, the university presidents, the TV networks, and others that are making money off these college kids who ostensibly are there at those institutions to get an education. But quite frankly, we're not even delivering on that promise. We're essentially clustering kids in majors. We're keeping them eligible rather than giving them an education just so we can be entertained, so we can be part of those 110,000 people in any given stadium on a Saturday afternoon in America. And so hence the level of corruption. You don't see the bribes and stuff per se like you see in FIFA, but money has corrupted it. It's taking it far away from its mission of education first. And that's why I think, we need to acknowledge that the system is broken. As long as we can bring all these people who have ideas of how to fix it together and understand that what we're doing now is wrong, then we can finally move forward and I think develop some other models. The system as we have structured in America is not going to make it much longer based upon economic issues, moral issues, health issues. There's many other reasons, and certainly academics is at the forefront. It definitely needs to change.
So now you're mentioning the academics. What do you think should be most important to the student athletes? Studying or the athletics department?
Well, I think you said it already. We say student athlete, right? It is an institution of higher learning. The problem in America is we don't have the other outlets that you have here in Europe. I think a young man or young woman, if they are truly an elite athlete, that they should have the opportunity, if they want to go to college, to participate in sports, or if they want to go to an external sports club or even to a professional league. But we try to channel people into, especially in football and men's basketball, by implementing certain rules to almost force them to go to colleges and universities so we can generate that revenue on their backs, so to speak. So I do think that if we enforce the academic standards, that will allow, and I think even force, other systems to manifest themselves, similar maybe to a European club sports system. And in that case, it would give athletes more choices. But if you're coming to a university, what should be first? And it should be academics.
How often do you think it happens that the school lets a student athlete, say football, pass its studies just because of the academic, not because of the athletic abilities that kid has to offer to the school?
All the time, and that's part of the problem is, the true access to social mobility and success in the world is through education, but we focus on these 4 or 5 years where these young men or women are athletically in their prime and that we can make money off them. And so quite frankly, we're bringing in kids to school and exploiting them monetarily for their commercial value, and we're not giving them the remediation and the education they need to succeed in college. We have a scandal a week in America with academics and athletics. So there's a huge one going on at the University of North Carolina now, and that's one of our top public institutions. We call it a public Ivy, so it's one of our better colleges, but yet they were immersed in a 20-year academic fraud scandal to keep men's basketball players, mostly minorities, eligible. Many of those kids were brought to North Carolina without the requisite skills to succeed at a very demanding academic institution, and then we're asking them to also practice and play 50 hours a week. It's impossible. So usually then something's got to give, and it most always is academics. Now, I'm not saying that those young men or young women should not be allowed to go to a school like North Carolina, but we at least owe it to them to remediate them and get them ready, maybe maybe by not letting them play for a year. There's other things that we can do to make sure that they are academically ready to handle those athletic and academic demands. But we certainly need to reduce those athletic demands too. We're asking way too much of these young men and women right now.
Todd Gurley 5 yards deep, and here he comes. Todd Gurley.
I think it was last year, Todd Gurley out of Georgia, who had this. There was this big case about him. I think he was demanding money for autographs, wasn't it?
Sort of. He was actually was selling his jersey, and this is one of the hypocrisies of the NCAA. It's pretty tough. The head coach at Georgia, a fine man, Mark Richt, nothing against him personally, but he's making almost $5 million a year, and yet you're going to punish an athlete for selling what essentially is his property for a few dollars, and that's where the silliness of amateurism, which really doesn't exist, and trying to maintain this educational facade. I don't think Americans would care one iota, and I don't think they do even right now, whether the kids are paid or whether they sell jerseys or not. We just want to be entertained and see the games. If we really cared, we'd be outraged right now and demand change. And that's what people like me and Andy Zimbalist are trying to do, is to educate people and say we do have problems. It's not as great as you see, and it's easy to kind of hear no evil, see no evil, we say in America, when you go to a game, and there's nothing like a college football Saturday. I still go to the games, but I know what I'm watching, and it's not education. I'm watching commercialized professional sports.
Do you see a system where the student athletes can get paid?
Sure, we're going that direction, and I'm not completely against that. I'm actually trying to say with my presentation is, that could happen, and if you really don't want that to happen, here's some alternatives. We could actually return, or maybe for the first time actually make college sports about education, but it would be a complete paradigm shift and a complete different model, and standards would be enforced, and we wouldn't see some of the things that we're seeing today. I don't think there would be people that wouldn't want that system, and I think other systems, external systems to college athletics would actually be developed, and I think that's great. The NBA and the NFL don't even contribute to their largest player development system. So eventually, as we continue to pay coaches more, continue to build unneeded facilities, and invest more money in football and men's basketball, it will be very difficult for the courts not to allow the players to get paid. And people seem to think that's going to make the world explode. I don't think it will. I think we would get over it. We would still watch it. However, if we don't want to do that, there are alternatives, but we're heading down that way.
And get back to a case going on right now. There's this whole big discussion about Leonard Fournette out of LSU, about if he should be eligible to the draft out of his it's his sophomore year now. And we had that system in the NBA, for example, where Andrew Wiggins come out of his freshman season, all that stuff. Do you think it would be best for the student athletes to be able to enter the NFL draft, per se, before their third season at the university level?
I think if you are good enough, or think you're good enough, although there are evaluations out there that would be able to say whether you or I are good enough to go pro. If you're good enough to go professional in football or basketball or whatever sport, and you're 16 years old, more power to you. Wayne Gretzky played in the NHL at 16 years old, or the old World Hockey Association. There are some athletes that could actually make it in the NFL right out of high school. It is, to me, ludicrous that we are putting restrictions on athletes and saying you have to be 3 years removed from high school, or in basketball you have to be 19 before you can go pro. And the reason that is, and the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletics Association, will deny it, but they are part and parcel with the professional leagues, because it works both ways. We're developing athletes for you, and we're making a lot of money, and you're going to get better, more developed athletes. My feeling is, if somebody should be allowed to go pro, Wiggins or Fournette, and let's just say they're not ready, well, that's not my problem. Then NFL and NBA, you develop them. You develop an external system to develop them, and give kids a choice. I'm not saying that education isn't important or somebody is not worthy of an education, but you may not want to go to college. I was the same way. I didn't go to college till I was 22 when I started, okay? So give the kids a choice. And maybe you want to maximize your athletic utility at the age of 17 to 22, and maybe you're not going to go to college until you're 30. That's okay. We shouldn't try to force this system down their throat and say, you need to participate in college athletics because you have to get an education, which, again, we're not delivering at this point in time. Let's give athletes choices. Let them go pro, let them go to a club system, or let them come to college. But if you come to college, it's going to be about education first.
Thinking about how big the collegiate sports system is, that to the audience is basically religion in the US, do you think they can adapt to some kind of change within the NCAA, within the system?
You know, I really do. It's funny because we often talk about things with regard to college athletics that this will never happen, but then something happens and we're okay with it. What Andy Zimbalist talked about, the additional dollars that just this year were allowed for athletes on top of their normal scholarship. So now you're talking about, on average, that college athletes are essentially now getting paid per year $2,000 to $5,000, depending on the institution. It's because it's based upon how expensive it is to live in that area. It's more expensive to live in New York than Tuscaloosa, Alabama, for instance. Just last year, when this was being talked about, coaches, administrators, college presidents said, oh my gosh, we are going down the road of professionalism. This is going to ruin college athletics. I hear nothing from those people right now. It hasn't changed. Americans just want to watch the games. If we just flat out paid college athletes a paycheck and treated them as employees, there would be people thinking that the world is going to come to an end. People saying, I'm never going to watch college athletics again. And that may be so for some, but I guarantee you probably 95% would not care. At the end of the day, we don't care. We know deep down inside that many of these kids are not getting an education. We know that many of them have not been adequately prepared for an education. We know that we are cheating through that million-page NCAA rulebook, but we go to those games on Saturday and we really don't care. So I think that we would adapt to any system. And honestly, when you talk about college sports, we're cheering for the names on the front of the jersey, not the back. So you and I could go play right now. You could play for Ohio State. I could play for Michigan. 100,000 people are going to show up.